All right, guys. Um, our game right now at this point should be fully functional, right? Should run, all the things should work, right? Start button, instruction button, player runs through the code, gets to the goal, gets to the end screen, restart button brings us back to the start screen. So that's the basic concept. I know many of you have added a lot of depth to this game, many different layers, all that kinds of stuff. And that's great. But today we want to add some simple notions that are going to help our game, like organizationally, right? Help our game be more game-like. One thing we're going to add, the thing we're going to look at in this video is adding a scoreboard, or more correctly, adding a mistake counter, right? Some way to count how many times we've run into a wall through the course of our game. Wow. So to do that, uh, we have to do a couple things. And one of the things that we need to think about is, how do you have something in a game that's going to change? How do you keep track of information in a game that's not going to stay the same? And in order to do that, anytime you have something that's going to change over and over again in a computer program, you need to have a variable. So if we look at variables, we can see down here in the second orange, the second orange circle, or the bottom orange circle, is the variables block. So if we go all the way to the second from the bottom set of blocks, we see variables. Click on that, and we can see we've got my variable, and then the top button there says make a variable. And that's what we're going to do right now. So I'm going to click on that make a variable button. That's going to pop this little window up. And I'm going to name this variable mistakes. Now, you could name this variable whatever you want it to be named, uh, wall smashes, whatever it is that you want it to be for your game. But mistakes make some sense. How many times did we run into a wall? How many mistakes did we make? You can leave it for all sprites. You can leave it as for this sprite only. That shouldn't matter for this variable. I'm just going to leave it for all sprites because it's not going to, again, it's not going to make a big difference. So I've got it named. I'm going to click OK. And now you can see mistakes shows up here. Notice that this is selected and also mistakes is showing up here. You can also deselect and make that go away. But for now, I want mistakes to show, but I'm going to make mistakes show, and I'm just going to click and drag this mistakes block. I'm going to put it down here in the bottom right corner of my game. That's where I want it to show up. So this is not over the top of any of my buttons or events or anything that's happening in my game. Now I've made the variable. The next thing I need to do is make sure that when I start the game, the variable isn't the same as it was for the last player. That doesn't make sense. We can look at this as an example and think about what this means. So let's just back off of what I just said and go forward. So basically what I want to do is every time I run into a wall, which is in my player code, so I'm in my player code and I'm scrolling down and I've got my wall color here. If I'm touching the wall color, then I'm going back to the beginning. Well, in addition to going back to the beginning, I want to add 1 to my variable. So I'm going to change mistakes by 1. That's really all I need to do, except for the thing that I started talking about a minute ago. So if we flag this game and click start, and we can go through our maze. Oh, I'm too good at this maze, or the maze is too simple. So let's run into a wall. You can see mistakes change, right? We can keep running into the wall and make it change more, or we can just navigate through our game and get to the end. All right, now here's what I want you to notice. When I click play again, I'm back to the beginning, and now mistakes is still at 14. So the mistakes I had from one game seem to be adding up and giving me mistakes in the next game, right? Even when I flag it, the mistakes aren't going away. And that's a problem, right? So if George plays this game and then Susie plays it, we don't want Susie to have the 14 mistakes that George made in her game. So we've got to make sure that we reset our mistakes variable. And that's a pretty simple process, but we've got to do it right here at the beginning. We actually probably should do it right here in the start of the game, right? So when we switch to the start screen, that's when we want to reset our mistakes variable. So we're going to bring in a set mistakes to 0 block and put it right there in our start screen. Now when I go to start, you can see mistakes resets to 0. I can start, run into the wall, and get through my maze. If I restart, mistakes goes back to 0, which again is what we wanted to do. Now, I had a student in one of my classes who was pretty, pretty adamant that she didn't want her mistakes counter to show up on her start screen. Well, all right, what do we do? Well, you can see right here we've got show variable and hide variable. So if we don't want mistakes to show up on our start screen, we can bring in a hide variable button, hide variable event, excuse me, in our backdrop switches to, right? Backdrop switches to start, we want to hide it. Backdrop switches to maze, we want to show it, okay? So that's really all we have to do to make this mistakes variable show up, hide, and even function. So if I flag now, you can see there's no mistakes. I click start, mistake shows up, run into the wall, it counts, do my game, goes away. Now you can see I left it here on the end screen, which makes sense. We want to see our final score at the end. Then we click play again, it goes away, click start, we're back to 0, things are working. So again, not too difficult to make a scoreboard that's going to keep track of our mistakes. Pretty simple. But variables, I'm going to tell you this, variables are one of the most powerful tools we have in our programming toolbox. And this one's one that makes it so you can affect events over in between sprites, right? You can make something that happens with one sprite, change something that happens with another sprite. Pretty powerful tool. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Pretty excited about the next video and then making sure that we've got what we need for our game. Good job.